Hi, I'm Michelle Segrest, and welcome to the Factory of the Future podcast. This podcast is inspired by my 3-volume book series on the evolution of modern manufacturing. Each episode features engaging conversations with game-changing experts discussing the processes and innovations that are changing the landscape of modern manufacturing. Thank you so much for listening. Please do me a favor and leave me a 5-star rating on iTunes and take just a couple of seconds to leave a review. And then go ahead and hit that subscribe button right now so you don't miss a single episode. I'm really excited because today we have an intriguing conversation and a great topic for you. Rex Wetherill and Cain are here from a very cool company called IOT Diagnostics. We're going to talk about how smart technology is helping manufacturers predict the unknown. Cain and Rex work every day with application-focused maintenance and reliability professionals in a variety of industries who all share one common nightmare: failing equipment. This is what keeps them up at night. IOT Diagnostics uses their experience and expertise to simplify the art of predicting unplanned downtime by making, moving, and managing data for manufacturers. By using smart technology that makes the sophisticated Internet of Things as easy as 1, 2, 3, they help end users quickly convert reactive maintenance into a proactive strategy. So before we get into the discussion, I want to tell you just a little bit about this great company, IOT Diagnostics. Have you been wanting to implement an IoT strategy but haven't had any luck in finding a resource? Do you experience recurring failures resulting in unplanned downtime and can't figure out why? Do you have an older machine that can't be replaced but want the self-diagnostic features of a new one? Well, look no further. IOT Diagnostics is here to help. Starting with a discovery call, their team will gather all the information regarding your application to define the hardware, software, and the time needed for a successful IoT deployment for predictive maintenance purposes. Next, they'll configure and scale all devices and sensors and work directly with your IT department to get them online. Do you want to make sure the right data goes to the right users? Well, they manage that too, and their services don't stop there. Receive a custom data experience to access all device and machine health analytics, trending, reporting, and email alerts. Do you have existing IoT solutions that all have separate dashboards? Well, they can integrate those into one experience for you. Welcome to working with a full-stack industrial IoT integrator. It's nice, isn't it? Visit www.iotdiag.com right now to schedule your free 30-minute consultation. A link is in the show notes. All you have to do is click it and you'll go right there. So now, without any further delay, I want to welcome Rex and Cain to the podcast. Welcome, guys. It's so great to have you here.
Michelle, thanks a lot. It's great to be here. And congrats on the success of your podcast.
Oh, thanks. I'm having so much fun. Glad to have you guys on board. I want you both to tell us a little bit about yourself and about your background and experience, and just tell the listeners why you're expert on smart technology. We'll start with you, Rex, and then Cain can follow.
I've been in fluid power for 38 years with a distributor that I ran for the last 15 years, and we served both end users and manufacturers. And we also supplied components, complete systems, as well as we did service and repair for them. So in short, I guess I've been involved in hundreds of applications, and I've seen firsthand the causes and effects of premature wear and unplanned downtime. For us, using sensors and the data that provide the insight on component and system health and drive actionable intelligence, that's been our purpose, and I've been involved in it for a number of years.
That's great. Well, Cain, tell us about your background and experience. Tell us a little about yourself.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm much newer to the industry than Rex is. I've been with IOT Diagnostics for a little more than a year and a half. And our group, a little bit of the outsider, again, from the background and experience, but I come in with deep operations management and professional services background. So I primarily help out when we're looking at our product development as well as our project management, and really in the space, really try to help and focus on the integration aspect of our solutions into the customer's environment.
Wonderful. Great. Well, you're obviously both qualified to talk about this topic. So let's get into it. As I mentioned in the opening, the big overarching problem that manufacturers have, and we hear about this all the time, is unplanned equipment downtime. This is the worst. This is what's keeping these people up at night. But approaching IoT to solve that problem can be intimidating, I think, for old school operators as well as manufacturing management. So I wonder if you guys can explain to us the three big problems that manufacturers face when using the Internet of Things.
Yeah, absolutely. So really when we're diving in and looking at the manufacturing space as it is today, I would break down three big problems. First and foremost, starting with unreliable data or lack thereof of that data. You're really talking about dated practices of paper reports and user-populated spreadsheets where you're just asking for keystroke and unintentional user error. And then in some cases, you've got zero insight into the health of the equipment, and you're really relying on that gut instinct and the failure, fix failure model, which obviously is going to have significant impacts to the business and to the machine. Beyond the data, you're really talking about a shift in workforce. Decades of experience is, leaving the industry, whether it's through natural attrition or turnover. And it takes a long time to really develop those gut instincts, that intuitive experience, and build up those machine whisperers that are on the factory floor.
Yeah, we hear about this all the time.
Sure.
Every manufacturer talks about the skills gap in manufacturing. It's a big issue, and it doesn't seem to be going away anytime soon.
And with COVID, it's made it even more difficult to have any of that transfer of knowledge between the machine whisperers and the new millennials that are coming in.
That makes perfect sense. I didn't even think about that because they're not able to kind of work hand in hand together to transfer that knowledge. I guess they're having to rely more on communication devices and things like Zoom meetings and that sort of thing, which is not near as reliable as being there and showing somebody something in person.
Yeah, absolutely. Again, that tribal knowledge is just slowly trickling out as the new generations are coming into play.
So there's unreliable information, unreliable data that's out there, or no data. And then there's this shift in the talent. So those are two of the big problems that we're seeing. So what's the third one?
So the third one I would definitely say is the ecosystem itself. So the OEM's role in all of this is to produce the latest and the greatest, whether it be the pump, the gearbox, the valve, but get that new product out to market, which then you're leaving hundreds of thousands of pieces of equipment, this brownfield equipment that's out there with little to no insight into their operational health, which just makes the job for the end user as well as the maintenance and service departments that much harder to diagnose problems, let alone before they happen, but also, after the fact, whenever they're going through a maintenance or repair cycle. And then really this is also just picked up from the OEM struggle to actually rapidly secure the quality data to influence new product design moving forward if they don't have a good reason for why their equipment is breaking down in the first place.
So I guess the first step is recognizing that these are the three problems, and then you have to start doing something about it. Is that right?
That is correct. In terms of just the manufacturers themselves, the most important part of them is being able to get reliable information and then having the people there that can actually understand it and then make decisions based on that. The disconnected ecosystem, it's an issue. It's really important for the actual manufacturers of the machine or the components in the machine for them to be able to use that insight for future product design or continuous improvement.
I know that there is a fear of technology in many cases, but once that is overcome, how do you tackle the core problems of IoT?
That's a good question because there is so much information out there about IoT and buzzwords about IoT, predictive analytics, all this stuff. And I think that some of the companies, especially the smaller ones, they're overwhelmed with so much information or so many things out there to look at, they're almost paralyzed to do anything. And there's this fear also that they think it's almost above them to be able to implement this. And one of the things that we try to do with the customers is to understand this isn't that difficult. We can have you up and running and collecting data, honestly, in minutes, and not to be totally overwhelmed with it, because there are a lot of companies that they want to come in and they want to outfit a whole plant. Just start with a single asset. Here's an analogy is that we're kind of like the Ring doorbell. If you just want to get started on this, just start with something simple that makes sense, that you understand. And then you'll continue to see that and then continue to probably grow and expand that.
So you're saying take one pump, one valve, one hydraulic press, something like that, and try a sensor on it and see how that goes. And once you get comfortable with that, then you can try more pieces of equipment.
Absolutely. They'll see data, they'll see information that they never saw before. And then all of a sudden they'll be able to maybe correlate some of that information to unplanned downtime in the past.
Right.
They'll be able to go, oh, now I get it. Now I understand. And then they'll go, well, here, now I want to outfit this. I want to censor this. At least that's what we've seen in our experience.
Do you think that part of that fear is they think, okay, I have this huge manufacturing facility and I have to, in order to benefit from IoT, I have to completely retrofit my entire factory, when really that's not the case. You can just start with one asset, one piece of equipment.
Oh, yeah. It's not an overwhelming task. If someone wants to do it that way, I would want to take a step back and say, hey, I just want to dip my toe in the water before I jump in.
Right. Well, let's talk about these 3 critical pieces of tackling the core problems of IoT. Tell us a little bit about that.
I think one of the challenges that we see is you may have the conceptual understanding for the benefits of IoT in the industrial space. What we're not necessarily seeing are always the strategies to implement and really where to start. And so what it really comes down to, what we kind of flagged, is like the 3 core problems to tackle is making the data, moving the data, and then managing the data. And so what that looks like to an end user is, from a making the data standpoint, it's understanding the right sensor packages to put on their equipment so that the contextual data coming out of it is actually going to be a benefit to them once they can visualize that in whatever slick dashboard they have set up at the end of the line there. But that's really the main thing, is there's a sensor out there for everything. And so working with the right partner to understand what the challenges are that the end user is trying to overcome, and then selecting the right sensor and hardware combination to pull that data and extract it into the right environment, that's really the big first challenge.
I'm sure that people say, they just don't even know where to start. Okay,
Sure.
So you can say, okay, I can just use one piece of equipment. Great. Which piece of equipment? Which one is going to tell me what I need to know right away? So I'm sure that's part of the problem. And that's where people like you guys come along to help them kind of ease into this idea of making all this data.
It is. And a lot of times we know we have a problem, but we don't know how to diagnose that specific problem and figure out what that is. So again, a lot of emphasis on the correct sensor and hardware package up front to make sure that that data that you're pulling out of there provides the right context to solve those problems at the end of the line.
Right. That makes a lot of sense. So the first core problem of IoT is making the data. So what's the second?
Yeah, now we've made the data, so what do we do with it? Now we have to get it somewhere. That maybe is the biggest challenge, the biggest hurdle in all of this, because you're talking about translating ones and zeros into really simple, clean, readable data. If you're just looking to pull a temperature or a pressure value out of a sensor, you don't want to have somebody with a PhD or a master's degree to do all the back end scaling and configuration to figure out, what those values are. That's definitely a big challenge, and partnering with the right provider and finding the right solution to that can definitely make the end user's life a lot easier.
Oh, I can imagine. When you talk about needing a PhD to do this, I think this is part also of the fear. Maybe it's more simple than people think. They just need a little guidance.
It definitely is. And our shameless plug here is that's a lot of what we focused on. So we've developed an application that handles all of the scaling in the background. So an end user is really limiting the amount of time they're spending with their IT department and really focus more on, let's get the sensor installed, let's get the device connected. I can scale it quickly. And then boom, I've got, as Rex mentioned a few minutes ago, we're talking about putting data in the cloud very, very quickly.
Okay, so you make the data, you move the data, and then what do you do?
Yeah, now we've got to manage it. We've got to do something with it. So we're moving that data into a really sleek dashboard that's really easy for the user to look into and get not only a fleet view of what all of their equipment and devices are, how they're operating, but also it's really important when managing that data to make sure that it's not only secure, but you're also able to go back and look at trending history for that piece of equipment, as well as even just basic user controls, such as, setting and adjusting alarm values, managing users with role-based permissions. Not everybody's going to need to have access to every device that's putting data out there, and you're not necessarily going to want to have everybody going in there and manipulating those alarm values. And then also just the ease and use of just being able to receive notifications throughout the process also. If you do have an alarm trip and you have something go into a state that needs to be immediately addressed.
Right. Okay. So making the data, moving the data, and managing the data. That seems simple enough, right?
Sure.
You just have to know where to start, and that's where people like you come in.
It can be daunting, especially when you're talking about looking at an enterprise rollout for an entire facility. We really emphasize pick an asset, a section of the plant or the factory floor that needs to be monitored and start small and grow in that experience.
Do you start with
think
like a trouble area, or do you start with something simple, or maybe a piece of equipment that has been failing, or do you start with one that's relatively healthy?
if you can, if there has been one kind of a problem component you feel like you've had to replace it more than others, or you've had some issues with it, that is really where to begin, because that will also give you the data to find out, wonder what the root cause of this has been. And then you can try to do whatever's required on the machine. It may be unrelated. It may be something that's out of a line. Be able to discern that from the data. I'd go to the problem one first.
Well, it seems then you see a little bit of success. The end user can say, well, this really does work. Having this data at my disposal really did help me solve this problem. So then you might try it on another piece of equipment.
And now a lot of this equipment that's in these factory floors, they may have data coming from the control of the machine, but it's typically not getting data from the fluid power component on the piece of equipment, the pump or the valve, or the cylinder, for example. Right now, they have no visibility of that. They have no idea what the condition is. They just know that, okay, right now it's working. They don't know if it's at 70% efficient when it was maybe at 90 when it was new, and we're getting close to it's going to cause a problem. That's kind of the importance, I think, of adding sensor technology to, especially to existing.
Yeah, that makes perfect sense. Now, earlier you guys mentioned this idea of these machine whisperers. And I love that term, machine whisperers. And these are the guys that just can put their hands on a piece of equipment and they know what's wrong with it, or they can listen to it and they can sense what is wrong. They're like human sensors. There is this problem in the industry of filling the manufacturing skills gap. And so how can these sensors that you guys work with and smart technology in general, how can it be used to help with this issue as we continue to think about building the factory of the future? These guys they're retiring. They're going away. And that knowledge is going with them.
Yeah, they are. I remember in my early years of experience, spent a lot of time on factory floors with reliability engineers, maintenance engineers, production people. I really was amazed at the way some of these guys could diagnose problems just with their ear, with their hand. They can just put their hand on. They know if it's, wow, that's hotter than normal. And now, as you said, Michelle, these people are leaving. And with that is the knowledge. So there's really no history. All the history is leaving. That's one of the nice things about being able to add the sensors and to be able to capture this data, is that you'll always have it. You'll always be able to refer back to it. Whereas when the machine whisperers leave, you have nothing, unless there was some knowledge transferred to the new people. But I think that's also a real advantage of outfitting the equipment.
It's really quite interesting because when you do think of these guys as human sensors, and now we need to replace that knowledge with real data that other people can refer to, it really gives you a good picture of what these sensors do. So these sensors are doing the same thing. They know the behavior of the machines, and they have a record of data that can be referred to. They can not only predict a failure, but can they even prevent it?
I would say that it can, because if you are looking at the data, or you have the people that you're working with that are looking at the data and can really bring the analytics of that to them, you can say, hey, we're seeing this, and here's a way to, for example, taking fluid samples. That's probably it's also a very easy application, is to be monitoring the fluid 24/7, because in excess of 80% of all component failures are due to contamination, whether it be particulate contamination in the oil, whether it be too much moisture, or even too much heat. A lot of that you can relate back to with component issues. So when you say, can you prevent? I would say yes, because the data will then give you the information to be able to say, hey, I need to improve this maintenance process. I need to change my filtration. It could be a host of things.
You can see trends, and that will help you to see the health of the equipment. And at least you can see when preventive maintenance is required. Then you can kind of schedule that in before the next scheduled downtime and make sure that happens, because you're seeing the trends and you're seeing how the data is showing you that, right?
Absolutely.
And I think that's a really good point because you're also emphasizing there that the data, while we absolutely think it can prevent a downtime event, it's not the end all be all today. I mean, through the adoption process of IoT, you still need those industry experts to be able to analyze that data. Again, really help interpret everything that's coming across or coming out of those sensors to make sure that you're making the right decisions. And you can predict more and more, obviously, as you start to gather more and more data.
That's so true. I know, Rex, in a previous conversation we had, you talked about how manufacturers really don't have visibility into the components of the machine, at least on the hydraulic side. You talked about how this gives you a little glimpse of what's there by having this data.
Most companies, since they aren't really right now, that have a lot of sensors on the equipment, so they have no visibility. So it's kind of like they're in a closet. Right. And we're just trying to put a window in that closet just to give them some idea. So, now I can see maybe there's a storm coming. Now I can be prepared for it.
Yes, I love that analogy.
They're driving blind. Right now they're driving blind, right, so to speak.
Yeah, that's such a perfect analogy. I love that. It really clears things up of what you're doing here. We talked a little bit about how you can just start simple and you can put one sensor on one piece of equipment. But how big of a project does it take to make a difference with this data? And also give us an idea, how expensive is it?
Well, it doesn't have to be expensive. There's a lot of companies that want to come in and kind of do an enterprise. Let's look at outfitting your whole manufacturing facility, all the equipment.
Right.
And as I think we mentioned earlier, that's a daunting task, and then it becomes a huge CapEx project. Whereas, let's start simple. For example, we can put a sensor on a pump, have you up and running in minutes. It can be done inexpensively.
So you're saying in minutes?
$1,000.
In minutes, you can start seeing data?
Yeah, in minutes. Using in minutes. Yeah.
And you said it could be as little as $1,000.
Yes. The maintenance guy can go, you know what? I'm willing to try this. And a lot of guys, they can do that on their maintenance budget credit card. And then when they start to see the data and they can go, wow, I had no idea. Or, okay, I see what you've been talking about. And get alerts and get some other things. Pretty interesting, the reaction the guys have.
I can imagine. And I know that, Cain, we're not suggesting that these sensors replace these humans. We're not trying to replace those machine whisperers, because there is something to be said about that instinct, that gut instinct that they have for these machines. But do the sensors just kind of complement that and give them just a little bit more?
Oh, absolutely. When we're talking about installing the sensors on pieces of equipment, really what we're talking about is providing those extra eyes and ears in every place that those machine whisperers can't necessarily be. They definitely can't be there in every place all at once. So what we're really looking to do is to allow them to have a force multiplier and be far more efficient in what they do on a day-to-day basis and complement their expertise in the field.
Yeah, that makes perfect sense. So it kind of verifies their gut. It kind of says, yes, your gut was right.
Yeah, it gives them the chance to say, I knew what I was talking about, and here's the proof in the pudding.
Yeah, there's something very valuable to that too, and probably helps them to buy in as well, because you've got a lot of all the younger generation that's coming in. They're tech savvy, right? They've grown up with computers, they've grown up with data and analyzing it. They know how to do this, and the older generation that's retiring, they grew up on instinct, and that's their superpower. But this kind of combines the two in a way that makes a lot of sense in a manufacturing facility where you've got a mixture of veterans and new guys that are tech savvy.
Exactly. Yeah, that instinct will never go away. And obviously we hope to see it grow with the new generations. We really feel strongly that the data provides validation of that instinct.
That has to be valuable. And it makes them feel like, okay, there's not some computer coming in or robot or something coming in to replace me. I'm still valuable.
Oh, gosh. They're even more valuable, especially when they can actually use the data to make the appropriate decisions. And they can spend time doing that as opposed to running back and forth to fix again.
Oh, sure. Yeah. So it's a time saver too for those guys. The ones that are there, and maybe there's only one guy in the facility that is the main guy that's fixing everything or diagnosing everything. It just gives him a little support in case he has a sick day or is on vacation.
Yeah, that's right.
Well, it makes sense that this is where smart technology can relieve some of the stress of this retiring workforce and also give some confidence to the new guys, because I think they could also see, hey, the data that I found, matches the gut of the machine whisperer. And so that probably gives them confidence too that everything is aligned.
Yeah. And I think it'll help them as the new guy, as we're calling him, as they see the data and they see the result, they're going to learn more about how the equipment operates. I think they're going to be able to learn quicker than the guy that totally worked off of his gut. He's got an assistant working with him that he didn't even realize.
Yeah, right. And I'm sure if you're in a facility that has 500 or 800 or 1,000 assets, you need a little bit of help to keep up with the health of all those assets. One person can't do that, right?
No. And, you get to the point, you can also, when you have all this up, you can almost rank, I guess, levels of concern of items so that you know which to address first, as opposed to, well, I got to address everything. When you use the predictive analytics, you'll know, okay, this one is the closest to being an issue. Let's look at that. And so they can prioritize.
Well, let's talk about that. Let's talk about this idea of data being able to predict equipment failures. Can it do that?
Yeah, it can. And one thing is that we'll always have failures. There's never going to be a time when we don't have failures. The hope is that this data will allow you to do the appropriate maintenance practices to extend the life of the equipment. And then not only be able to extend the life of the equipment, is then be able to determine as it's coming near the end of its useful life. And being able to fix that or address that on your time, not the component's time.
That's interesting. That makes a lot of sense. When you talk about unplanned downtime and trying to prevent that, how hard is it to sell that to management? The guys who are writing the checks but aren't necessarily dealing with the problems on the floor.
Michelle, that's been a difficult task because certainly in all the years that I've been out in this market and field, we could, without a doubt, with great clarity, explain to the customer that, hey, if you did this, it would result in you not having to need us as often to repair your pump, for example. And I was amazed at the kind of reluctance because it was almost like some of the stuff was CapEx and it wasn't in the budget and they couldn't, maybe it's because the people couldn't convince them that this is going to be, the result would be this. The unlimited amount of money that seemed to be available to fix things when the production line was down, that could have been prevented in a lot of cases.
When you think about $1,000 sensor and a $50,000 piece of equipment that you might have to replace if it breaks down, you start to see there's value here, right?
It starts to make a lot of sense. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, but I guess when you're creating a budget, you don't put in a budget for the $1,000 sensor and you don't put in the budget for the $50,000 piece of equipment either. So to change something either way can become difficult. And so you just keep fixing it. I mean, of course, you're paying someone to fix it over and over again when it fails.
That's right. Run to fail, fix it, and then run to fail, and no changes. But I think we're going to see a shift in that, Michelle, because there is so much data that's coming out. When I data, I mean, it's probably overused, but there's so much information about the benefit of doing this. And I'll add COVID to this a little bit. COVID is going to accelerate the adoption of people using IoT technology.
Yeah. Are you seeing that shift already due to COVID?
I think a little bit of it, because I think the companies are getting kind of used to or have adapted to do things remotely, and being able to put these sensors on to get remote access, and maybe not only remote access, but to get alert. Let the data and these platforms that companies have out there, I mean, we of course have ours, but to be able to analyze the data and they know where the alerts are, send it out to them. It's not like they have to spend their time going on the computer. They can just let it come to them, push notifications.
Yeah, when I think of all this data that you're collecting, I start to envision just these massive multiple page spreadsheets that would take a PhD to decipher. It's like trying to translate hieroglyphics or something. And so just how difficult is that for someone who's not used to working with that much data?
No, it's really not difficult at all. And again, the key, at least how we approach, is in the interpretation of that data on the front end to make sure that, again, those ones and zeros that are coming out of your sensors and out of the equipment are translated and really easily viewable for the end user, making it so that way you've got snapshot views so you can go in. You're not just looking at raw numbers, but you're also looking at gauges and, again, similar to, when you're in your car and you're watching your speedometer go go up. You can see very similar gauges when you're looking for pressure spikes or temperature increases or decreases. So it's just as much visual in that data experience as it is just a raw number.
Ah, okay. So that's a good analogy because you think about it, you wouldn't even consider driving a car without a gas gauge or without a speedometer, right? And that's
No,
smart
you don't even think
technology
about it.
too.
Yeah,
And that's smart
absolutely.
technology. We don't think twice about having that kind of smart technology. So why not have those same kind of gauges and controls on your manufacturing equipment, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
And again, I think
Yeah.
those slick dashboards will become more and more table stakes for operations moving forward. Just being able to have all that information, again, really visually accessible right at your fingertips is definitely the way of the future.
If you start with a couple of pieces of equipment or one section of your facility and you start to move, how long does it take to just retrofit an entire facility? I'm sure it depends on how big the facility is, but is it a many years long project or can it be done relatively quickly? And can all equipment be retrofitted with some type of smart technology?
Yeah, I believe it can. There are so many sensor manufacturers out there. There are sensors for virtually everything, as we have found out in some of the custom projects that we've been involved in. And we've had to do quite a bit of research on some of the sensor technologies out there. It is amazing. To answer your question about how long, some of it's one is how motivated the strategy for the company, but the other is how invasive is it? If you're going to add sensors, do you have to shut the machine down to actually install the sensor? Is it something that sensor can be done while the machine's running? Those are the types of things. Or if they have regular shutdowns, can it be done during that shutdown? Those are all kind of factors in it, but it's not a daunting task. We have stuff that you can get started without shutting the machine down. Just use the existing stuff that's already on there, and we can connect into it and get it to the cloud in minutes.
Now, if they already have some technology connected to their machines and then you come in and add your technology, can all that be integrated into the same data dashboard?
Yeah, absolutely. And that's, again, I think that's even going to become more and more important as technology continues to advance and new sensors come out or sensors are improved. It's really important for you to have the ability to pull all of that data into one place. So that way you're not pulling up dozens of different windows on your desktop. You're able to pull everything into, a nice, clean fleet view and access your data, whether it be on fluid property or vibration, all in one clear place.
Ah, that makes sense. Okay, good. Well, that's good to know because some people might say, well, I've already started. I don't want to start all over again. So they can start where they are and grow from there.
We do see a lot of the sampling out in the marketplace as well, where somebody's trying one technology and maybe looking to move to another. So that's really commonplace as well.
I just am curious with regard to the fourth industrial revolution or industry 4.0 as the buzzword we like to use. What are some of the manufacturing trends that you guys are seeing right now out there? What are you seeing with some of your clients?
We're seeing some that say, I know I'm way behind on this. I need your help. I've realized that I didn't have a strategy. I need to get one. The largest manufacturers they're embracing the technology. They have strategies. It's kind of the middle guys that are kind of missing out, and they need to really look into this. And I think you're also going to see that at least a lot of the trend reports and market reports that I see is that this market is going to be growing in the neighborhood of, I've seen numbers from 12 to 36% compounded annual growth rate a year, which is completely off the chart. So there's going to be a kind of a sudden influx of people trying to do this. And I just hope that they can find a partner that they can trust.
Right. Well, that's key.
And can help guide that journey.
Well, do you think that most companies are effectively preparing for the future, or do you think that some are just sitting there with their hand in the air saying, what do I do?
It's a really mixed bag. Rex talked, you got some of the larger corporations out there that are able to dedicate entire teams to IoT solutions. And then on the other hand, you've got manufacturers that just don't have those resources. And again, maybe they understand contextually the benefit that's there, but it's just not in the cards for them today, at least not to roll out at that enterprise level of we're going to completely adopt an IoT solution and try to pull as much data from as many of our machines as possible. Just the option for that is not always there. We really are seeing customers at both ends of the spectrum.
This has been a really interesting conversation. The takeaway that I'm seeing is that it's possible for smaller and medium-sized companies to embrace Industry 4.0 and smart technology. They just maybe have to do it with a slower strategy and start with smaller pieces of equipment or smaller number of pieces of equipment and then grow from there. And they don't have to do it all at once, like maybe the bigger companies can do. That's kind of the takeaway I'm seeing, that it's doable in small doses. Am I reading that right?
Oh, you're absolutely right. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Okay, good.
Taking that first step. And there are lots of companies out there that can help people take the first step.
That's great to know that there are people like you guys out there that can sort of help build a strategy and then also have the technology to go with it and can go in and get people started and help them figure things out, figure out how to do this and how to embrace this factory of the future that we talk about all the time. I really want to thank you guys for being here. And it is really interesting. I could talk about this all day long, but I know we don't have a whole day. But I want to give you guys the last word. So is there anything else that you can tell us about how smart technology is helping manufacturers predict the unknown and solve this ongoing headache of failing equipment? So Rex, give us your last word, and then Cain, you can give us your last word.
I want companies to understand that the positive impact that can be gained by having a strategy. As I say, if it's hey, I just want to outfit this one pump on this one machine or this one valve or this one component, and implementing a smart strategy. I mean, I tell you, the advantages are real. As I say, the hard part's getting started. Get with someone you trust. You'll be amazed at what the data and the trends will teach you about your process.
What do you think, Cain? What are your final words?
I'm definitely on the same page as Rex. The important thing is, I go back to the old expression, you eat the elephant one bite at a time. And so rather than stepping back and saying, wow, it feels overwhelming, it feels like too much, it's okay to start small. Again, remember the important things there is just make the data, move the data, manage the data. And it's as simple as that. So finding the right partner that can help you set up that strategy and get you going in the right direction. A lot of times all it takes is just that first step.
Right. Make the data, move the data, manage the data. It's as simple as that. That's just the best line. Easy peasy. Just get started and do it. Embrace it and do it. Thank you for being here.
Michelle.
I really appreciate it. It's really fun. It's been fantastic. And I just want to remind the listeners that Rex and Cain and IOT Diagnostics can help you and your company prepare to compete in this quest for the factory of the future. So I want to tell you a little bit more about this company. Don't you hate it when you develop a plan to implement remote condition monitoring only to find out that you need a PhD and to hire a programmer just to configure everything to the cloud? And maybe it doesn't stop there. You might need to hire another software provider to retrieve the sensor data to actually use it. Well, not anymore. IOT Diagnostics has developed a sensor-to-cloud gateway that can be configured in the field to read up to 4 analog sensor signals with 0 programming required, all from an app you can download on your phone. With the Dock4 Sensor-to-Cloud Gateway and the IoT Assist app, you can now scale analog sensor signals on the fly in the field, configure it to the network, and dump it into your IoT data experience. Get up and running with data visuals, trends, and alerts within minutes, and stop unplanned downtime now. Visit www.iotdiag.com right now to schedule your free 30-minute consultation. A link is in the show notes, so just click it and get started today. This brings us to the end of the show. Thank you so much for listening. Please do me a favor and subscribe, rate, and review the podcast on iTunes. If you have interesting information to share and want to contact me about being a guest on a future episode of this podcast, please send me an email at michelle@navigatecontent.com. You can also send me questions that I will have my expert guests answer for you on a future episode. And in the meantime, please check out my book series on modern manufacturing to read more than 30 real-world case studies about how global companies are using smart technology and innovation to build the factory of the future. All the links to the books and articles mentioned in this podcast are in the show notes. Have a great week, and please join me for the next episode of Factory of the Future.